Okay, so this is going to be a continuation of the essay that I am writing and that you guys are writing as well. So I'm just going to cover my introduction once more. Lord Byron once said, "There is a pleasure to the pathless woods, the idea of being by oneself, with nothing but the birds chirping and the leaves rustling from a random soft wind, just seems to breathe life into that inner being who longs to escape the hustle and bustle of modern life." Chris McCandless sought this very thing. After abandoning all of his possessions and money, he traveled west and lived a life of voluntary vagrancy, eventually ending up in Alaska. He found an old abandoned bus and resided there for a little over 100 days until he succumbed to starvation. His story and ability to leave everything behind inspires thousands of everyday people. As a result, pilgrimages to hike and see the bus where he died, also known as the Magic Bus, grew more and more frequent. However, the Alaskan government made a decision to extricate the bus from its original location and put it in a museum. This controversial decision deadens that spiritual journey that other people love so much. The Alaskan government made a terrible mistake interfering with this trip. They should not have removed the bus. Okay, so after this introduction, which I fully explained in the last video, I went ahead and started writing the two body paragraphs. And so what I'm going to do is pretty much go here, okay? So this is the topic sentence of my second paragraph known as the body paragraph. Removing the bus wasn't only a terrible decision, but it was also disrespectful to so many people. And so basically what's going to happen here is this is my topic sentence, okay? This is what I'm going to be talking about, that the removal of the bus was disrespectful. And so now that I've made the claim, what I need to do is, like I said earlier, I need to provide evidence and reason. So this is where I can use the quote from my research to either support my claim, or I can use the quote and as the claim and support it for myself. The bus itself was a tangible memorial to Chris McCandless and his adventures. It meant so much for the average person or the experienced traveler to venture out into the wilderness and visit this sacred resting place. So as far as the evidence goes, I went ahead and decided that I would answer the question, well, what makes you think that? Okay, removing the bus was a terrible decision and it was disrespectful. What makes you think that? The bus was a tangible memorial to Chris McCandless. Okay, so why? Why is that important? Why is it important that there's a tangible memorial to Chris McCandless? And so what I basically said at this point was, well, it meant so much for the average person or the experienced traveler to venture out into the wilderness and visit this sacred resting place. It is true that since McCandless's death, the bus location lured thousands of visitors, resulting in 2 deaths and 15 rescue missions. But do such small numbers justify its permanent removal? Even the Denali Borough Mayor Clay Walker hinted this sentiment when he said, "Seeing it leave the Stampede corridor was, honestly, a little bittersweet." Referring to this action as bittersweet only proves that there may have been some reluctance on the part of the Alaskan government. So what I ended up doing here is in blue, when it says it is true, that is going to be my counter argument, okay? I'm acknowledging opposition to my opinion, and then I'm using the quote from the mayor to refute it. So I basically put up the fact that, okay, yeah, the fact that the bus was there, 15 rescue missions and 2 deaths resulted from that. But, as insensitive as this is going to sound, those really aren't very big numbers. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up using the quote to support my reason. And then I explained the quote and how it connects my claim to the reason. Therefore, there's a little transition word, this can easily be considered an overstepping of their authority and a lack of respect to those who dreamed of once visiting the bus only to have it stopped by this shameful decision. And so as you see there, I went ahead and I put, I kind of routed it back to what I had said earlier, was that it was a bad decision and it was disrespectful, but I put lack of respect there. Okay, so as I was going through the finished body paragraph, I realized that at the very end I have a couple of be verbs, can and be, and then I figured that visiting the bus only to have it stopped by this shameful decision, I figured that there's a word that I could probably substitute in there, higher level vocabulary. So this is what I ended up coming up with. At first it says, therefore, this can easily be considered an overstepping of their authority and a lack of respect for those who dreamed of once visiting the bus, only to have it stopped by this shameful decision. So what I ended up doing is I said, therefore, this overstepping of their authority and lack of respect to those who dreamed of once visiting the bus forever thwarts that spirit of adventure, making this a shameful and inconsiderate decision. So basically, I decided to, instead of saying stops, I put the word thwart, because if something is thwarted, that means that somebody has a plan to do something and they're kind of like, it's taken away from them. And then what I did is I, instead of saying disrespectful, I said inconsiderate, which I consider both of them, those words to be synonymous, basically. Okay, so then I decided to go ahead and there's the entire body paragraph 1 for you to look at, and I just went over the whole thing. So now I'm just going to show you body paragraph 2, which leaves after this only for me to write a conclusion. So anyway, let's look at body paragraph 2, and I'm not going to break it down as much as I did the last time, but I am going to just read it as I went through it. Speaking of disrespect, now this is where you start getting some of your voice into your argument. Remember, this is an argument, and it's okay to not sound so incredibly academic. So there's definitely a voice here. And as you can see in this, as you're going to see in this body paragraph, I put a lot of questions in there, a lot of interrogative sentences, because I want to ask questions that are rhetorical, that would make the reader have to kind of think about the question that's being asked, and hopefully that will help drive my point home. So I have, speaking of disrespect as well as McCandless, it is proper to assume that the two victims of this dangerous trek would appreciate their fates to result in the bus's removal. I can say for myself that as an admirer of the story, hold on, that doesn't sound right. Is it proper to assume the two victims of the dangerous trek would appreciate their fates to result in the bus's removal? I can say for myself that as an admirer of the story and the bus, and one who respects the final resting place of those who died tragically, it is hard to think that the two victims would approve of this decision. They more than likely would feel disrespected, as well as having the Alaskan government interfering with the story by throwing them under the bus. Excuse the pun. According to the Department of Natural Resources, they made this decision because they were prioritizing public safety. Well, life itself is a daily risk. Whether someone is walking, driving, or hiking, there is always a risk to public safety. Are we to assume that 15 mountain rescues and 2 deaths are more than the dozens or even hundreds of lives risked and lost in Alaska yearly? Isn't risk present on the hundreds of man-made trails that encounter indigenous wildlife like bears and wolves? Within the grand scheme of things, removing the bus from its location disrespects the very people who add to Alaska's tourism in an attempt to bond with nature. And let's remember, nature is not always safe. So as you see here, I got my second quote right here. I put in an idiom that we've been learning, and then I went ahead and I kind of acknowledged that there was a pun here because, throwing somebody under the bus is blaming somebody for something, and I acknowledged the pun, which of course adds a little voice and a little color to the paragraph. Not to mention the fact that there are a handful of questions that are asked. And I'm bringing up the fact that, it doesn't matter what you do in Alaska, there's always going to be a risk. I mean, I don't have to go visit a bus and cross a river for me to encounter danger and possibly end up injured or dead. So I just kind of mentioned that, it certainly was an act of disrespect in the sense that there are 2 people who had every intention of paying homage, honoring the place where Chris McCandless died, and then of course they met their ultimate demise, and now the Alaskan government decided that they were going to use those 2 deaths to justify removing the bus from its area. So anyways, this is basically what I'm going to go over in class today, actually on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then, of course, I'm going to turn everybody loose to start writing or finishing their body paragraphs. And I'm going to be expecting them to get all of those things that we wanted, like the quote and the use of transitions and a pun. I mean, not a pun, an idiom, and some high-level vocabulary as well. Okay, so anyway, this is what we're going to be doing Tuesday and Wednesday. And then, of course, Thursday and Friday are going, which, if the weather permitting, Thursday and Friday we're going to be finishing this, and then of course the week after that starting our CSWA. See you tomorrow.